Hello, everybody. It is 5 o'clock, and I will have your sports update for you here on Thursday, July the 13th. I'm Dusty Baker, and we've got quite a bit of sports action going on across the country and, of course, right out of here in Louisville, but nothing bigger than the football season on the horizon. We are 50 days away from the first kickoff of the season, and that is with the U of L taking on Georgia Tech, and it's a big one. It's the Chick-fil-A kickoff game, and that'll be at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, and that's right where the Atlanta Falcons play as well. So it'll be on a national stage. It'll be a Friday night kickoff as well. A lot of course, major kickoff games like that taking place on Saturday, but this will be really the first major game of the season. And so, of course, U of L right in the thick of things as well. Naturally, we had to talk to Jeff Brom about what this is looking like as far as training and preparation, not just for this one game, but overall for the entire preseason. They should be getting back in action in roughly 3 weeks. And so Jeff Brom had quite a bit to say about just his overall process, as well as the players he's brought in, how they're going to mesh, and more importantly, what he expects from his team and from himself.
I think every year it probably will adjust more and more, and you've got to be able to adapt.
While Jeff Brom is adapting to calling the shots at the U of L, he is also adapting to the college football landscape.
The age of college football right now is being able to use the rules that have been set to help improve your football team.
Brom taking advantage of those rules, allowing players to jump to and from schools through the transfer portal, including his former player from Purdue, starting quarterback Jack Plummer, who is transferring from Cal.
He wants to be the guy to help this football team win, and he understands that a lot of things fall on his shoulders.
Brom says the Cards have already prepared for their upcoming opponents.
Through the spring, through the summer, and then even to fall camp, getting ready for certain opponents. Definitely your first 4 opponents. Then occasionally you may pick a rival, or you may pick a big game as well down the road that you prep for to a certain degree. Make sure you have a tentative game plan ready to go.
And with his team on the same wavelength as he is,
so we've got to put in a lot of work. We've got to continue to do that. We've got to push ourselves to get better every day.
They intend to transition from fall camp to a win in their opener.
You go on the road game one in an environment against a team that played really well last year at the end of the year. So we'll have our hands full. And if you don't come ready to play each and every week, you're going to get beat.
Obviously, transfers will be such a big part of this team here in 2023 for Jeff Brom. I think what's more important to consider here as well, he had a lot of success at Purdue just recently. So heading over from Purdue over here, he has a couple transfers as well coming over from Purdue. I had also mentioned, quarterback play is obviously super crucial. Having a guy that he's familiar with and is, of course, familiar with him in Plummer is going to be crucial. They do have a couple other guys in that quarterback room that Brom has talked about that have made this kind of a competitive quarterback room. He mentioned that a little bit in his press conference further on as well. We had some of that covered on Twitter. So if you go back on Twitter, you can see some of what he said about that on my page at Dusty Baker TV. Also at Wave News Sports, you can also see what Brom said to further discuss the quarterback room. Overall, though, should be interesting to watch this squad as they are preparing to head out into camp. It should be roughly 3 weeks from now. And of course, as I mentioned, they are 50 days away from kickoff for their 2023 season in the era, the first year of Jeff Brom as head coach. Now, moving on to LouCity, this has been kind of an interesting start for them. They were on a bit of an undefeated streak. That was until, of course, last night when they ultimately fell to Pittsburgh, and talked to manager Danny Cruz, as well as defender Sean Toach, who discussed the loss and, of course, their frustrations as well with the loss.
Second half, we came out flat. They created some opportunities. All in all, honestly, not a good performance again from us, and we need to make sure we go back to the drawing board, dissect it, and look at making sure we certainly continue to try to work on and fix the attack.
We had chances to finish. It's not like they didn't keep us from putting ourselves in positions to score goals tonight. We were in position to score goals, and we either didn't finish the ball or, got unlucky with some calls. But I think, that even some of the scenarios, guys would say that, we got to get shots off.
Obviously, both gentlemen very frustrated, and rightfully so. They fall 1-0, and that was to the Riverhound squad out of Pittsburgh that they didn't score against in their previous match as well. So Pittsburgh snaps the streak, the undefeated streak, I should say. When you look at the numbers in this one, the team actually outshot the Riverhounds by 2. But Pittsburgh had 5 more shots on target. LouCity only had 1 shot on target. Pittsburgh had 6. And the most important one, the one that truly actually mattered, which was the goal in the 68th minute that ultimately propelled the Riverhounds to victory. So LouCity is going to have to turn their attention to next Wednesday when they have an equally as important match. They will now head on the road, though, where they will play at Detroit. They will face Detroit FC, trying to start a new streak as well. We're going to move on to college basketball. And in just under half an hour, the UofL women will get back on the court in Toronto. This will be their second game in the Global Jam. And just to clarify for everybody that may be watching on TV and they see that it's spelled Global Jam without an A in global, yeah, that's how they spell it. So I just want to put that out there. Global Jam in Toronto, Canada is continuing, and UofL will take on Canada at 5:30. So they're facing the host country. They're coming off a 78-55 victory. Very impressive. Specifically, I think the teams and the players to look over here within the team are their 3 coveted transfers, and that would be Sydney Taylor as well as Jada Curry, and then Kiki Jefferson on top of that. The 2 major names out of this were Taylor and Jefferson. Taylor, she is called Swish on this team. That's her nickname. She played very well, was very impressive in her performance, was 6 of 10 from 3-point range. And more importantly, she totaled 22 points, was the most on the floor. And then Jefferson also stepped up in a big way. She put up 10 points. She also put up 10 assists, and she was very, very close to a triple-double. She was just off by a little bit. She had 7 rebounds instead. Also, I'd mentioned Jada Curry, and Curry at least had somewhat of a solid impact initially in this one. Also had 7 assists, didn't turn the ball over as well. So a very good overall start for the UofL. I think more importantly, you got to listen to what Jeff Wall said afterwards as far as his approach to these games early on.
It's just a different ball game internationally, the way they officiate and the way they call compared to back home. I think it's great for our kids because you have to be tough. If you're not tough, you cannot make it.
And not only is UofL playing, and as I mentioned, they will be tipping off at 5:30 against Canada, but another American team will be facing Canada, and that would also be the squad out of Lexington, the Kentucky Wildcats, the men's team. They are representing Kentucky in the Global Jam. This will be their second match as well, and they're coming off a victory, much like the UofL kind of dominated their game. Kentucky, they were challenged a little bit against Germany, but they still won 81-73. This is a completely new squad as well. I think it's very important to mention that. And even before we go into the details, this is what John Calipari had to say about the fact that this is a new squad. So the expectations during this time, it's just to get them to mesh together.
You got a brand new team, and you're trying to say, well, you only are doing 2 or 3 things. That's all we could do. We can't even get it in on the side out. I tried to tell them to go to a line. We haven't done it yet. Just go on a line, get it in. I mean, but they competed, and that's all you want to see. Do they have fight in them? Do they play to win?
Yeah, so don't pressure him. Let him do his thing. I think it's important. There are a couple footnotes from the game yesterday that kind of stands out here. Number one, and this is very impressive. Kentucky, they are 147-12 all time in exhibition games, and they've won 26 straight as well. That is an impressive feat considering oftentimes you play in these games, and while they don't count on paper, it's matches like this where it's still you're representing your country. There's still something on the line there. So the fact that they've been able to do something like this, that is incredibly impressive. Kentucky's also 44-1 in exhibition contests that are under John Calipari. So needless to say, he prepares them as if it's a regular season game. With that being said, you heard him say it right there. I mean, he's using this opportunity ultimately to prep his kids. And this is a young squad. We talked about it yesterday. It's the #1 recruiting class in the country. And they had their starters set up, and they looked pretty decent as well. Kentucky scored 27 points, and those were off 22 German turnovers. So Kentucky forcing turnovers left and right. That was a big takeaway, no pun intended. Kentucky also had 10 total steals. They had 5 blocks in the process. When you talk about their starting lineup, the one that really stood out was Antonio Reeves. He led all scorers with 24 points. He also made 3 3-pointers. Reeves had the chance to potentially go into the the NBA draft. Instead, he pulled out. He will have another year with Kentucky, and they are going to need him because he's going to be more of a veteran leader in this squad. Trey Mitchell kind of is going to be a similar impact on this roster. He added 20 points behind 4 3-pointers, and he also brought in 6 boards on top of that. So impressive from those top 2 guys right there. And one last name to really throw out there that was kind of impressive was DJ Wagner. Had 16 points, 6 assists, had 2 steals as well, and 2 blocks on top of that. So they're getting production from all pieces at the moment. I'll even throw out Justin Edwards as another one because he had a team high 9 rebounds. He topped 4 points in there with 4 assists. So a good solid start for Kentucky. Now they will be the nightcap matchup. They will follow the U of L. As I mentioned, U of L playing at 5:30. Kentucky will play at 8 o'clock against Canada. And both of those games can be seen as well on CBS Sports Network. One last thing I want to get into here. We are so close to the MLB trade deadline. And if you know me, you know that baseball is kind of my thing, and I study it left and right. And needless to say, Louisville is going to be an interesting city to watch, and specifically the Louisville Bats, because they've got pieces that very well could be on the move. I can tell you at the very least, they have plenty of intriguing pieces that could be on the move if Cincinnati decides that buying is what they want to do. Now, the Cincinnati Reds are in an interesting position. Let me start it with this. They have a future ahead of them, okay? There are some teams out there that don't necessarily have the luxury. And I'm surprised. I think a lot of people are surprised that we would be talking about the Reds having a luxury at this point in the year. But I kind of want to compare them to the Yankees. The New York Yankees do not have the luxury of youth. They just simply don't. They have Anthony Volpe, and that's really about it. Jason Dominguez in their system hasn't been performing particularly well. The Yankees are kind of aging out a little bit is the best way to put it. Garrett Cole is on the older side. Aaron Judge is much older, and obviously he's also suffering with an injury. Giancarlo Stanton hasn't been producing at the high level that is expected of him, and he's older. Their window is closing. The Reds, their window is just beginning to open right now. So why do I mention these two squads? Well, the Yankees might need to buy because, quite frankly, they need to capitalize on the pieces they have right now. If they don't, then their window could close, and all of a sudden you get a bunch of upset New York fans. Aaron Boone all of a sudden is blamed for everything. It could be a mess. But as for the Reds, you know, the Reds could finish, and Reds fans don't want to hear this, but they could finish in 3rd place, 4th place. And quite frankly, I think that's what a lot of people expected of them. This first place start has been incredible, though. And so they want to capitalize and try to maximize that with the rejuvenated fan base. Naturally, you want to do that. But the question is, how many pieces are they willing to part with, and who are they willing to part with? Well, if they're willing to make the big splash, the big deal, maybe they're going to have to part with some of the pieces that are here in Louisville. And I'll name a few of them for you right here. Jose Barrero is one that comes to mind maybe first, possibly the most intriguing piece to sell. And that's simply because he was a hyped up prospect at shortstop. You may have actually known him as Jose Garcia. He changed his name recently, and it's Jose Barrero now. But he was sent down to Louisville. He just wasn't producing. He's seen some time in the outfield. He's proven that he can be a little bit versatile. The problem is the bat just hasn't showed up. And so consequently, he has found himself at AAA. He may be on the move. He's currently with Louisville. Another one as well that is intriguing at the moment is Connor Phillips. Now, if the Reds want to get a pitcher, and maybe the team that's trading them the pitcher is trying to get somebody that's a little bit more stability for the future, well, Connor Phillips is a solid one. His ERA is a little bit higher than you want. It's in the 3.5s, but he also strikes out hitters at a ridiculous peak, leading the minor leagues in strikeouts. So another face right there. The Reds probably are going to be less likely to part with him just because of, I would say, the overall organizational lack of depth at pitching. But you never know if they, acquire somebody that's a starter that maybe has control, they may be more likely to deal him. And then there's another one, Noelvi Marte, who they actually acquired in a trade for Luis Castillo. So it should be interesting to note that the Reds, if they held on to Luis Castillo, they would have their frontline starter, but they also wouldn't have Noelvi Marte. You look at the farm system they've developed. I mean, it's been very impressive, and this is another face in the system. Noelvi Marte is a top 20 MLB prospect in the league. And then finally is the guy that I'm most intrigued by. That would be none other than Christian Encarnacion Strand, who has been on an absolute tear. And this is the one that may get the most reaction as far as, do you trade him? Do you keep him? Obviously, you want to keep him, but if you're getting the chance to win, are you willing to trade a piece that, quite frankly, doesn't really at the moment have any sort of avenue to get to the MLB and not by his own action? His own action, he's hit 321 with 20 home runs, 58 RBIs, 2 stolen bases, and an OPS over 1,000. So I think the real question is, you have to talk about Joey Votto, who's sitting there at first base. Occasionally, you'll have Spencer Steer standing there as well. Maybe you'll have Tyler Stevenson. The Reds have a lot of guys that rotate at first base. Christian Encarnacion Strand can play first. He can also play third base. However, your problem is Elly De La Cruz and Matt McLain. You need to get them in the offense, and you're not moving Jonathan India. So McLain's going to play short. Elly's going to play third. And on some off days for India, maybe at DH, then you're going to have McLain shift over to second, Elly to short. But there just doesn't seem to be a direct opening for Christian Encarnacion Strand. So do you wait? Do you hold him at a level where, quite frankly, he should not be at anymore? Encarnacion Strand should be at the MLB level. These numbers he's putting up are insane. And if you get the chance to watch the Louisville Bats over the next couple weeks, watch because of him more than anybody else. He is a superstar in the making. But do you trade him for a superstar? That's the real question. Maybe address a pitching rotation need. And so therefore, you're giving a spot where you have depth and you're getting a spot maybe you don't have depth. That really is what begs the question. And really the name that pops up the most here, and I'll give you a few targets that I'm kind of discussing off the top of my head with this. You're talking about Shohei Ohtani. You know, if you're going to try and acquire Shohei Ohtani, you're going all in this particular year. I don't know if I see the Reds doing that. I think the Reds will at least inquire, but I have a hard time seeing the Reds dish off an Encarnacion Strand for 3 months of Shohei with the idea that they probably won't be extending him as well. So a couple other pieces that maybe he gets dealt for, but highly unlikely. I think more likely the Reds will target and try to use some of the other lower pieces are guys like Lucas Giolito, starting pitcher for the Chicago White Sox. Lance Lynn, also starting pitcher for the White Sox. Marcus Stroman, interesting one right there. He's making quite a bit of money. It would be an in-division trade. Don't see that necessarily happening with the Cubs, but that's another target. How about another in-division one? It would be Jordan Montgomery or Jack Flaherty, both with the St. Louis Cardinals. So those are a couple targets, but as you noticed, I said a lot of in-division. So maybe the Reds target's going to have to be a team that has a little more control over a starter. And at the moment, it's really hard to pinpoint what team actually has a controllable starter that is worth the cost at the moment. So it's something to kind of stay tuned with. But for now, I think that you just got to hope for the Reds that they continue to keep winning so they give themselves the opportunity to buy, or at least give themselves the option to buy. Now, with that being said, that will close it for your sports update here on Thursday, July the 13th. Do me a favor. If you interact with us online, feel free to comment, ask us questions, send us questions in our mailbag, and also follow us on Twitter. As I mentioned at the start of this, it's at Wave News Sports. Once again, it's at Wave News Sports. I'm at Dusty Baker TV on Twitter, and you can also find me on Facebook at Dusty Baker Broadcasting. Kendrick Haskins will be joining me next week, but you will catch me on Friday as well. And then once Kendrick returns, we'll return back to our normal scheduled podcast, the Kendrick and Dusty Talk Sports Show. And looking forward to keeping this going as well. But please, if you have any questions, if there's a topic you want us to talk about, hype about, answer any questions you may have about the sports world, whether it's in Louisville or, quite frankly, it could be anything, we're more than welcome to answer your questions. And we want to interact with you to the best of our capabilities. But with that being said, that will do it for this Sportscast. Thanks again for watching. I'll join you again on Friday. You guys have a great evening.